Certainly appreciate your presence tonight. It's definitely an encouragement to me. It was announced this morning that I'd be the speaker, and you still came, so that's definitely an encouragement. The title of my lesson this evening is "Ye are the light of the world," and that comes from Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. "You're the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid." And verses 15 through 16. "Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." And I don't think you really would even need to answer the question if I asked how important light is. It's almost like a rhetorical question. There's just such a long list of ways that you could express how important that light is to us. But, sorry, can you hear me? Some say yes, some say no. But anyway, so obviously light is very important, but if you turn to Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, it gives us just a little bit of an idea of just how important that light is. "And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day." So we can see here that light is so important that that's literally the first thing that God did, was give us light. Without light, what do we have? We would have no concept of anything. So we don't really even need to go into any of the science of it about how plants need light for photosynthesis, and then they produce oxygen for us. That's all just kind of understood. We need light for everything. And so we also understand the concept as the Bible goes and teaches. It compares and contrasts a lot of things like reaping and sowing. We compare that with things we understand with planting in the field, and then we bring forth harvest from that. And so when we plant the seed of the Word into people's hearts, then we can see a harvest through their spirit, a spiritual harvest. And so that's just one way that the Bible compares and contrasts different things. And I just don't see how there's any other better way to compare and contrast something, or anything that's more different than between light and darkness. Light represents God and Jesus. Light represents truth, all things that are right, and all things that are heavenly, good and pure. Darkness represents sin and all things that are worldly, wrong and evil. It represents Satan, the one who comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. So these are complete opposites. If you go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light." So before we were baptized, we were living in sin, and we were living in this darkness. And as Christians, we are now the opposite of darkness. We are light, or we are to be the light. We were once lost, and now through Christ we've found light. And so this is kind of the area where I want to spend a little bit of time. So after we become a Christian, after we've turned from the darkness, now we're supposed to be the opposite of darkness. We are the light to those around about us. So now, what are some of the characteristics that come to mind when you think of Jesus? The first of which I would assume would be love. Matthew 22, 36 through 40. "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and all the prophets hang on these two commandments." Also, you probably think of the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5, 22 and 23. "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law." In John 8 and 12, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have light of life." And so I think we're all very familiar with Jesus' love, the fruits of the Spirit. Jesus embodies all these things, right? and he is the one who we're to emulate. And so there's been so many good lessons on love and fruits of the Spirit. I know I couldn't hold a candle to those. And so I'm going to kind of go forward from there a little bit, assuming that we know these things, that Jesus is love and he embodies all these things of the fruits of the Spirit. And so what we're to do as an example to those around about us as we emulate Christ is we're to show these things. We're to reflect God's love. We're to reflect God's light through us to those around about us. So there's been a few, I would say, minor things that have happened in this past year to me. I guess it didn't really happen, but just kind of things in my life that I noticed and made me think of this topic of being the light to those around us. And one of which, both of them are really very minor, but one of which was I was at the doctor and I was getting some blood drawn, and they missed the vein, and so they're rooting around in there and stuff like that, and I'm kind of making little faces, because it's not very comfortable, but didn't say anything, and the lady was super nice and just apologizing over and over again, and so finally she gave up and tried someplace else, and I never said anything at all, and then she finished and everything, and she just kept apologizing again and again and again, and I just said, if that's the worst thing that happens to me, then it's going to be a pretty good day. And she just looked at me and she just goes, if everybody had that thought, or if everybody acted like that, then things would be so much better. And I didn't really think anything about it at the time, but this is somebody who, that's literally all she does. She just draws blood, she does IVs and stuff like this every day, so she sees at least a dozen people. And so I'm sure she misses from time to time. And so obviously, a lot of people don't take it quite the same way. And it took me a few days, but just something kind of stuck with me about that encounter with her. But so then I've seen her in the months since then, and she was new at the time. But and anyway, so before she was just kind of, cordial and nice, but not really in conversation. But she remembers me now. She remembers me and she wants to talk and how are things going and stuff like that. And she spends more time with me even when other people come into the office to get jabbed. But so just that encounter just kind of stuck with me about, I didn't really think anything of it, I just didn't get worked up, just stayed calm and acted like it wasn't any big deal. Then, so I would say it was probably in early February, we had, a snowstorm, and I was out plowing snow and pushing a parking lot, and a guy comes walking over from his yard or from his driveway and asks me if I could plow his driveway. And I was like, oh yeah, no problem. He's like, what do you want? He's just kept naming off this, and he tries to, hand money in my truck and stuff. I'm like, don't worry about it, it's no big deal. And he goes, you're a Christian, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. And they didn't say anything. I was like, why do you say that? It just kind of caught me off guard. And then he started going on this rant about how everybody's just so self-centered and everybody's after their own thing. They don't care about anybody else and this and that and everything. And so what ended up happening is I went and I talked to him literally about church and about God for longer than the amount of time it took for me to plow his driveway. But that was something else that just, I didn't really think anything about it. It didn't take me 10 minutes, to plow his driveway. And you're a Christian, aren't you? And so that was just another thing that's just kind of put this into my mind about how just something can be so simple and have an impact on other people. If you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31, whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do, do all in the glory of God. Now, as we're striving to be Christ-like, we are not trying to shine the light on ourselves. We don't want to put the spotlight on ourselves or, I'm so great for doing this. And I kind of am hesitant to tell you those stories because it kind of makes me, you know what I mean? Kind of makes me sound braggadocious or something like that. But the point is, I didn't really think anything about it. I've never seen the guy before again that I plowed his driveway and or anything like that. And I guess basically what I'm getting at is as we're showing the glory of God, we are not trying to highlight ourselves. We are trying to reflect God. That person recognized that I was a Christian by my action, and I didn't really do anything to, besides what I would normally do to, I guess you could say, deserve that. I'm trying to think how I really want to articulate very well, but basically, we just can't put the spotlight on us. I feel like different times when you see like the televangelists or the people on the radio and stuff like that, of course I don't know their heart, but the more you listen to them, and I just can't help but think, are you in this for you? Or are you in this to show the glory of God? And like I said, I can't judge their heart, and I don't intend to, but sometimes it just kind of makes you wonder. We want to stay away from that. We don't want people to question whether we're trying to boast ourselves up or whether we're trying to reflect the glory of God and show them who Christ is. I'm not a philosopher or anything like that, of course, and so I'm sure I've heard this in the past because I don't think it's too simple. I wouldn't have been able to come up with it. But if you think of God as the sun and Christians as the moon, of course the sun provides the light and the moon cannot provide light on its own. It reflects the light of the sun. So if you think of us in that same way, we are not making our own light. We are reflecting God's light. And if you think about a full moon on a nice clear night, it can really light the place up, even though it cannot produce its own light. Matthew chapter 6 kind of addresses some situations about being man-pleasers. Matthew 6, verse 2. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. And then farther down in verse 16 through 18. Moreover, when ye fast, be not as the hypocrites of sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily, I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thy head and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast, but unto thy Father which is in secret. And thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. And these are just a few passages where God is stressing the importance of it's not about us, it's about God. And we're not trying to please other people, we're not trying to look good to other people for our own benefit, but for the benefit of God, and to help bring them to God. Spiritually blind people are living in darkness. They can't understand the gospel or biblical things. And when you read or watch the news, it seems as though the world is getting darker and darker. It's easy to think, what good can we do? What little light can we shine on such a dark world? Sometimes it just seems as there's no hope. And as I was thinking of light and darkness, I was reminded of a time when we went on vacation when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure it would have been Mammoth Cave, but we took a little boat tour back through a creek or river through the cave systems. And so as we're going in through this cave, you get into the entrance, there's plenty of light, and they're talking, and you're not really paying any attention. And then they get in there after a while, and then they turn the light off. And it's dark. I remember them saying, you can't even see the hand in front of your face. And I remember going, they're right, you can't. But the point is, that's a complete absence of light. Without us shining light to those around about us, then they're in a complete absence of light. We are their only Bible. I remember they once, they turned the light off, they lit a match. And you think a tiny little match doesn't hardly produce any light. But in the complete absence of light, that little bitty light just lit up that whole cavern. And it was almost like you just flipped the light switch on. I mean, this little flame's like a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch, itty bitty thing. Just lit up the whole place. And so that just kind of got me thinking about how little things that we can do to reflect the glory of God can really light up the world around us. So God's light isn't tiny. He has a very large light, and through him I just really feel like we can make a difference to other people. We shouldn't feel like there isn't any hope. Through him all things are possible. I've heard the question posed, if we are charged in a court of law for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict? Do we have enough witnesses to testify that by our actions we are a Christian? Do we have witnesses that testify that we've led our family in public prayer in a restaurant before eating? Do we have witnesses to testify that we have risen above the fray when confronted by another, and we've forgiven them, we've made the right choices, we've held ourselves with high regard? Or do we have witnesses to testify the opposite, that we conform to the world, maybe we curse this person, or we told them we never forgive them? If we're not doing these things, if we don't have witnesses to testify that we're a Christian, then we're probably not shining our light or God's light to the world around us. There are a few things that we need to do in order to become a Christian. First, you must have heard the word, Romans 10:17. So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. We find in Matthew chapter 16, verse 16, that we must believe. And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art Christ, the Son of the living God. Acts 2:37 through 38 instructs us to repent of our past sins. After the Jews learned they had crucified the Son of God, they asked Peter, What shall we do? And Peter said unto them, Repent and be baptized. Jesus said in Matthew 10, verse 32 and 33, we must confess him. Whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him also will I confess before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. And finally, we must also be baptized in order for us to be saved. Mark 16:16, He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. And then in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, he offers his invitation to each and every one of us. Come unto me, all that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest in your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. This lesson obviously hasn't been for those who necessarily designed for those who have not yet been saved, but I guess a bit of my goal of this lesson is, as we're shining our light to those around us, they'll ask, what's different about us? Why don't you hold a grudge against people? Why are you always in such a good mood? Why do you think just take things with a grain of salt, no big deal? This is, we need them to know this world is not our home. We have a higher hope. And so as we think about shining our light around us, it's with this end goal in mind. It's to get people saved. It's to bring people to Jesus. And so if at this time you would like to be baptized, we ask you to come forward as we stand and sing. This is also the time where you have to come forward if you need to bring something in front of the church.
6:29.